Somebody is mowing our grass." Bertie Sutter stood at the kitchen window in her nightgown with her hands flat against the glass, and behind her the clock over the stove read 6:10. The light outside was still the color of skim milk. Out in the front yard, where the Johnson grass had gone up past a grown man's knee and gone to seed twice over, a woman in a faded blue work shirt was walking a push mower in long, patient lines, and the smell of cut green was already coming in through the screen. Wade Sutter came out of the back hall barefoot, buttoning his cuff, and stopped where he was. He knew that mower. It was his own, the one that had been leaning against the shed wall since April, with a flat wheel and a cracked pull cord, and it was running. "That's Miss Nell," Bertie whispered. "She had not turned around. She's been out there a long time. I heard her when it was still dark, fixing something." Wade set his hand on the back of his daughter's head and did not say anything. Out in the yard, the woman reached the fence line, tipped the handle, swung the mower in a clean half circle, and started back the other way. She did not look at the house. She mowed like a person who had decided something and did not intend to discuss it. "Is she mad at us?" Bertie asked. "No. Then why is she doing that?" Wade watched the blue shirt move against the pale grass and could not think of one honest answer that would not cost him something to say out loud. "Get your shoes," he told her. Nell Hargrove had lived on the far side of the section road for 11 years and had been widowed for 4 of them. In a town the size of Marlow that made her either a person to be pitied or a person to be worked around. And Nell had refused both. She had taken her husband's tools out of the shed the week after the funeral, learned what they were for, and gone into business quietly with a truck older than most of the men who hired her. She sharpened blades. She reset fence posts. She cleaned gutters in October and burned brush in February, and mowed lawns from March until the first freeze, and if anybody thought a woman past 50 ought not be doing it, they thought it privately, because she charged fair and finished when she said she would. Wade had not hired her. That was the trouble. He came out onto the porch with his boots in his hand and waited for her to reach the end of the row. When the engine cut, the silence had a ringing edge to it. "Morning, morning," Nell pulled a bandana out of her back pocket and wiped her forehead with it. Her hair had come loose on one side. "Your cord was rotted through. I had a spare in the truck. Your left wheel was off the bracket too, so I put a washer in there, but you want to get a real one when you're in town. I didn't call you." "No, you didn't." Wade sat down on the step and pulled his boots on, mostly so he would have something to do with his hands. "Nell, Ray Fenner's boy is coming out here Thursday to look at your east pasture," she said. And she said it to the mower, not to him, crouching to knock the packed clipping off the deck with the flat of her hand. The whole town knows it. And a man with grass to his hip has already told everybody who drives past exactly how he's doing. "I didn't figure you wanted that told." Wade looked at the road, and then at his own front yard, which for the first time since Marie died in November looked like a place where somebody lived on purpose. "What do I owe you?" "Nothing this time." "Nell, then hire me for the rest of it." She stood up and put the bandana away. "You've got a busted hydrant behind the barn and a screen door that will fall off its hinges the next time that child slams it, and I would guess you have not sat down to a hot supper since spring. I'll come 3 days a week. $60 a week, and you feed me on the days I'm here, and you don't have to be pleasant about it." From the doorway behind him, the screen creaked. Bertie had gotten her shoes on the wrong feet and had come out anyway, and she stood there with one hand on the doorframe, looking at Nell the way children look at weather. 3 days, Wade said at last. 3 days. She went back to the mower and yanked the cord, and it caught on the first pull, which he thought was probably a small unfair miracle arranged for his benefit. The house had gotten away from him. That was the plain way of putting it. Marie had run it the way a good foreman runs a crew, and when she was gone, Wade had kept the cattle alive and kept Bertie fed, and had let everything else slide a little further every week until the sliding was the shape of the house. There were curtains still pinned back the way Marie had pinned them. There was a calendar in the hall still showing November. Nell did not touch the calendar. He noticed that in the first week and did not know what to do with the noticing. What she did touch was the pantry, which she reorganized without asking, and the back hydrant, which she rebuilt with a kit that cost $4 and took her 40 minutes, and the screen door, which she rehung with longer screws and a spring so it closed slow instead of cracking like a rifle. She cooked on the days she came. She left the extra in the icebox and glass dishes with tape on the lids, and on the tape she wrote what it was and what day it would go bad, in square block letters, and Wade found himself reading those little labels longer than a man needs to read 4 words. Bertie was 8 and had gotten quiet the way some children do, which is worse than the loud kind, because you cannot tell where it hurts. She did not talk to Nell for the first 9 days. She watched her from doorways and from the top of the stairs and once from inside the coat closet, and Nell let her, and never once turned around and asked what she was doing there. On the 10th day, Wade came in for dinner, and there were 3 plates on the table. He stopped in the doorway with his hat still in his hand. Nell was at the stove with her back to the room. Bertie was sitting up on her knees in her chair, arranging the forks, and she had put the 3rd plate at the end of the table, where Marie used to sit, and then, thinking better of it, had moved it to the side nearest the stove, which was a seat nobody had ever used for anything. "That one's yours," Bertie told Nell, "because it's closest and you get up a lot." Nell did not turn around right away. When she did, her face had nothing on it but ordinary. "That's good thinking." She sat down in it. Wade hung his hat on the peg and sat down too, and for a while there was only the sound of forks and Bertie talking, which she had not done at a supper table in 7 months, telling a long, confused story about a dog at school that may have been 2 different dogs. Wade did not say anything about the plate, not that night and not after. But when he went out to close up the barn, he stood in the dark for a while, with his hand on the door, and had to work at his breathing. In August, the peaches came in on the 11 trees Marie had planted along the drive, and came in all at once the way they will, and by the 2nd morning the ground under them was going soft and yellow, and the yellow jackets had found it. Nell came up the drive at 7 and looked at that mess and went back to her truck for a bushel basket. "You're not paid for that." "No, Nell, your wife put these in," she said, and she said it without any particular weight, standing under the first tree with her hand up in the leaves. Somebody carried water to them for 4 summers in a 5-gallon bucket, because there's no line run out here, and the ring around each trunk is worn in a circle exactly 1 bucket wide. That is a lot of walking. I am not going to stand here and watch it rot in the grass. She picked all 11 trees over the course of 2 days. She showed Bertie how to tell by the smell instead of the color, and Bertie went up and down the rows with a lard bucket and came in every hour with her chin sticky. Nell put up 31 quarts in the kitchen, with the windows open and the fan going, and her hair tied back in the bandana, and she scalded and skinned and packed until midnight both nights. And she did not charge him a nickel for the sugar. When it was done, there were jars on every flat surface in the kitchen, still ticking as they cooled, and Wade came in at 11:30 and stood among them. "You could sell these," he told her. "They're not mine. They're not exactly mine either. They're hers." Nell wiped down the last ring with a rag, and now they're that child's, in February, when it's gray and she's tired of everything, and there is one bright thing in a jar. That's what they were always for. Wade put his hand flat on the counter next to the jars because the room had gone briefly unsteady. He had spent 9 months being told he was in his grief, and had learned to nod at that, and had come to understand that most people were saying it to get out of the room. This woman had never once said the word. She had just gone out and picked 11 trees. "I was wrong about you," he told her. "Most people are. It doesn't cost me anything." But she stood there a second longer than she needed to, holding a wet rag, before she found her keys. The trouble came in September, and it came the way trouble does out there, on a piece of paper. The bank had been patient about the east pasture for exactly as long as it intended to be, and then a man from Weatherford came out with a folder and a soft voice and made an offer for the North 80 that was fair enough to be insulting, since everybody involved knew what it would mean. Wade sat at his own kitchen table and listened, and said he would think about it, and after the man drove off he sat there another hour with the folder unopened in front of him. And there was the other thing, which was worse because it had no paper. Marie's sister Delia lived in Abilene and called on Sundays, and in the second week of September she stopped asking about the cattle and started asking about the woman. She asked it politely. She asked it 3 times in one conversation. She said she only wanted to know what people were saying, and Wade, who had never in his life been quick with an answer, said nothing at all, which Delia took the way silence is always taken. By the following Thursday it had been around the church twice. Nell heard it at the feed store from a woman who thought she was being kind. She did not mention it. What she did instead was worse. Wade came up from the tank at dusk and found her truck still in the drive, and Nell sitting on the tailgate with her boots hanging, which she never did. And there was a paper folded in her shirt pocket that she took out and handed him without preamble. It was a listing sheet for her place. 11 acres, the house, the barn. Sisters in Bowie, she told him. She's had the 2 strokes, there's nobody else to go. Wade read the sheet 4 or 5 times without taking any of it in. When? They'll put the sign up Monday. It could sit a year out here. It could sit 2. But you're going. Wade, you're going. Nell looked out at the pasture, where the light was going long and orange over the grass she had cut. "I'm 56 years old, and I've got about $900 and a truck," she said. "There is not one thing in my life that is going to wait around for me to decide. That's all. It isn't anything about here." "I didn't say it was." "You didn't say anything at all," Nell told him. "You haven't for 4 months. And I want you to understand that I am not asking you to." She got down off the tailgate and went around to the cab, and Wade stood in his own driveway holding a piece of paper about somebody else's house, and up at the kitchen window the curtain moved, and neither of them saw it. Bertie heard all of it. Children hear all of it. The window over the sink was open, because the window over the sink was always open, and she had been standing on the step stool washing out a glass, and she stayed there long after the truck was gone with the water running over her hands. On Saturday morning, Wade woke to an engine, not a truck, a small engine, laboring, cutting in and out, somewhere a long way off, and it took him a full 10 seconds lying in the dark to place the sound, and another 2 to be out of the bed. Bertie's room was empty. The screen door was standing open on its slow spring. He went out barefoot across the wet yard and up the section road in the gray light, with his heart going like a fist, calling her name once and then not again, because he could hear where the sound was coming from, and it was a half-mile off, across the road, in Nell Hargrove's front yard. She had pushed the mower the whole way. A half-mile of gravel in the dark, in her nightgown and her boots, 8 years old, and she had gotten it started somehow, which he could not account for at all until he saw later that she had watched Nell do it maybe 40 times and had simply copied it. Choke and cord and all. She was mowing Nell's yard. She was doing it badly. The lines wandered. She had gone over the same strip 3 times and left a whole crooked island in the middle, and she had to lean her whole body into the handle to keep the front wheels down, and she was crying so hard she could not have seen much of anything. Nell came out of her house with a coat over her nightclothes and stopped on the porch step with one hand still on the door. Wade got there and shut the engine off, and the quiet came down over all three of them. "Bertie, I'm not done. Bertie, she has to stay." His daughter turned around with her fists closed and her face wet and furious, and she was not talking to him. You said you only come mow when somebody needs something. You said that to Daddy at the fence. And I need something." Nobody moved on that porch. "So I did yours," Bertie went on, and her voice went to pieces. "So now you have to come back and do ours. That's how it works. That's how you said it works, and I did it wrong, but I did it, and my mama is dead, and I am not going to get another one unless it's you." The wind came across the 11 acres and moved the grass she had not gotten to. Nell came down off that step. She came across her own wrecked yard in her boots and her coat, and she went down on both knees in the wet and gathered that child in against her shoulder, and she did not tell her that everything was all right, and she did not tell her to hush. "I hear you," she said into Bertie's hair. "I hear you. I'm not going anywhere this minute." Wade stood 10 feet off with his hands hanging and understood, all at once and far too late, that the only person in his house who had been brave in 4 months was 8 years old and had just pushed a mower a half-mile in the dark to say what he would not. He came back at 7 the next morning. Nell was already out. Of course she was. She was in his front yard in the blue work shirt with the mower going, cutting the long lines from the fence to the drive the same as she had the first day, as though a person could settle anything by making a lawn look decent. Wade came off the porch with 2 cups of coffee and stood in her path until she stopped. She cut the engine. She took the cup. She did not look at him. "You only mow my lawn when you want something." It came out rough, and it came out teasing, and it was the closest thing to a declaration that Wade Sutter had managed in his entire life, and they both knew it. Nell looked up, and she winked at him, quick and dry and entirely herself, and lifted the coffee an inch. "I want something." Wade set his cup down on the fence post. He took the mower handle out of her hand, gently, and pushed it out of the way into the grass, because he had come out here with a thing to do, and he was not going to do it around a machine. Then he walked past her, down the drive and across the section road and up the other side, a half-mile in his boots with her calling after him once and then giving it up. And he went into Nell Hargrove's front yard and put both hands on the post of that for sale sign that had gone up on Monday and worked it back and forth until the concrete let go, and carried it out and laid it flat in the bed of his truck. He drove it back. She was standing where he had left her. "That's not how it works," Nell told him. "It's not the sign that sells it. No, there's still Bowie. There's still my sister. Then we'll go get her." Wade shut the tailgate. "There's a room on the north side with nothing in it but Marie's sewing table, and I can move that in an afternoon. It's got its own door to the porch. It's cooler than the rest of the house in summer. Your sister can have it as long as she needs it, and longer than that." Nell put her hand over her mouth. "The bank takes the North 80, Wade went on, because he had it all lined up, and if he stopped he was not sure he would start again. I signed it Tuesday. It's done. It leaves me the house and the home place and enough to run 300 head, which is what I ought to have been running for 6 years anyway, and it means I do not need anybody to work for $60 a week." He looked at her then. "I never did want you for the $60. "Wade, Bertie put your name on the mailbox," he told her. "Wednesday, in wax crayon, on the inside of the lid where she thought I wouldn't look." I looked. Nell Hargrove, who had buried a husband and learned to run a chainsaw and had not let one person in that county see her cry in 4 years, sat down on the porch step of a house that was not hers and put her face in her hands. Wade sat down next to her and did not touch her and did not say anything else. After a while, she leaned over and put her head against his shoulder. and he moved his arm so it would fit better, and that was all that happened. And it was enough to build the rest of a life on. The screen door creaked behind them on its slow spring. They married in November, in the front room, with 11 people and a preacher who had driven over from Marlow, and a pot roast that Nell had put in at 5 that morning because she did not know how to let anybody else do it. Delia came from Abilene. Delia had a great deal to say beforehand and, in the event, cried harder than anybody and held on to Nell's hands at the door for a long time without managing a word, which in that family counted as a blessing. Nell's sister came out at Christmas and stayed. The north room got a bed and a chair and a window box, and by March she was well enough to sit on the porch in the afternoons and tell Bertie things about Nell as a girl that Nell would very much rather she had not. The calendar in the hall got changed. Bertie did it. One morning in December, standing on a chair. Nobody made a speech about it. In February, on a gray flat day with the wind out of the north and nothing good on the horizon, Nell took a jar of peaches down off the shelf and opened it at the kitchen table, and the smell of that August drive came up out of it into the cold room, and Bertie ate half the jar with a spoon and asked whether the trees would do it again. Every year they're alive, Nell told her. The summer after, Wade came up from the barn one evening and stopped at the gate. Out in front of the house, in the long yellow light, his daughter was walking the push mower down the fence line with her whole weight on the handle and her tongue between her teeth. The lines were still crooked. There was still an island she had missed, out near the drive. A little green tuft standing up in the middle of the cut grass like it had been left there on purpose. Nell was sitting on the porch step in the blue work shirt with 3 glasses of tea on the board beside her, sweating in the heat. Waiting, she had not gone out to fix the island. She had let it stand. Wade came up the walk and took the middle glass and sat down. Out on the lawn the mower went quiet, and Bertie turned around, red-faced and filthy and enormously pleased with herself, and hollered across the yard. "Mama, is it straight?" Nell lifted her tea. "Straight enough."